Well, we're going to look at the good book again today. It's a good thing to do every now and then. Open up that good old book and see what we can learn. I have this pending excitement, this retirement thing that just sits in the back of Bill Bickmore's mind all the time. It's like, oh boy, how's this going to work? We've talked about it a lot in the men's group because, all the way along here we have this perspective, we guys at least have this perspective, and maybe you gals can relate to this, that I have to earn money, I have to provide for the team, I have to take care of everybody, and so I go out and I get a good job and I make some money and I bring it home and everybody's happy. And if I bring home a lot of money, people are more happy. Well, we'll discuss that later. But anyway, and if I can't make it, then I worry about it and I go out and I try to get another job, or I try to supplement my income, or I try to be wiser, and I work at it. And then I come to this thing called retirement, and I just go, well, see, I'm just going to wait for the check. Ooh, just wait for the check. That's all I do. I wait for the check. That's all I do. I just sit and wait for the check. Oh, I don't know if I can do that. And so we plan. I plan at least. And I've got charts and graphs about, if I withdraw 5% or 4%, or if the stock market goes to 3.7. So today we're going to do some financial advising, okay? So those of you that need some financial advice, I'm going to give you some. Bill, the amazing financial planner. First thing is I'm going to give you some advice on how to plan for the future, all right? Which is what we're all worried about, what's going to happen down the road. It's hard to see down the road, but we got some advice for that. How to handle what you have today, that's a good thing, right? What are we going to do with today's cash flow and today's stuff that we got? Whose advice to follow? There's a lot of advisors out there, so whose advice should you follow? And finally, a recommendation to avoid any stinky plans, and I'll explain stinky later, okay? So let's get started. We're going to be in Luke, as soon as I can find my Bible. We're going to be in Luke chapter 16 today. We're going to start right off at the beginning of that with the parable of the shrewd manager. Yes. So Jesus here is talking to his disciples, but there are people listening around the perimeter, as we will find out late in our passage today, beyond his disciples. So there's a crowd gathered. As Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." The manager said to himself, "What shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg." I am ashamed to beg. "I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses." So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, "And how much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. I'm going to stop there for just a second. This is a pretty wild story that Jesus is telling. I would put this in the parable category, which is a story that's meant to teach something beyond what the story actually says. So the story here is about a manager of an estate, we'll say, for a man who is apparently fairly wealthy, and this manager is mismanaging, and he gets himself in so much trouble that the boss is going to fire him. Okay, you're getting fired. I want you to settle up. I want you to close the books up. those of you that, you know, Ed and Jim, you'll understand. I'm going to wrap up the books. I want it to all balance out, and you give it back to me because you're not going to be the manager anymore. And so the guy who is going to lose his job, he looks around and realizes, I don't have a lot of resources here. I'm not that strong, and I am too proud to beg. And so what will I do? I know, in this last day I have, I'm going to bring my boss's debtors in, and I'm going to cancel their accounts. I'm going to bring their balances down. I'm going to make it so that they don't owe as much money. And what does that do for the poor folks that owed the guy 1,000 whatever? Well, they're like, what? Instead of 1,000, I only owe 800? Oh man, instead of 600, I only owe 3. Instead of 4, I owe 2. I owe 2. Wow, this is great news. And so all the debtors to the boss are now happy with the guy who was the manager, right? He says, oh, this will work good. I'll have lots of friends who will welcome me in because I saved them gobs of money. Now, is Jesus saying that this is A, good technique, or B, acceptable that we should follow as an example? Because when we hear Jesus speak, we assume, well, he must be telling me something I should do. So maybe I should, you know, cheat my boss out of half of what he's owed. Ooh, I'm pretty sure that that's not what Jesus was getting at. I'm pretty sure that that's not the point of the words of Christ in this passage. In fact, as he goes to finish this off, he gives an explanation. He says, this is what the point is. So let's continue on the story here. It says in verse 8, collecting where we were, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. And Jesus wraps this up with, he says, for the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Jesus wraps this up with a commentary on one element of the story, the shrewdness of the manager. The manager was shrewd. Now, what does shrewd mean? Shrewd is an interesting word in our text here today. In the Greek, it has to do with being wise, sensible, or prudent. It doesn't mean conniving, which is what we think of right away, right? That was a conniving, nasty move. Instead, this word really has something to do with he was thoughtful, he was creative, he was prudent. He was evaluating the situation well and making a decision that was sound. So Jesus' commentary here is he evaluated the situation, he made a sound decision. And he said, how odd is it that the people in the world, of the world, make these kind of great decisions about their future based on their present reality, and yet when we see the people of the light, well, those would be the followers of God, those would be the people who are Christian, how come they're not as wise, as prudent, as planning for the future? He says, why aren't they as shrewd? The people of the light aren't as good as that. He says, I tell you what to do. Those of the light, I want you to use your worldly wealth, to gain friends for yourselves so that you will be welcomed into the kingdom. Now, we could take this and expand it beyond money, but today we're just going to focus on our worldly wealth. We're going to focus on just money. So Jesus here is saying, guys, the guys who are in the world, they use their money wisely to prepare for the future. But you who are of the light, do you use your money wisely to prepare for your future? Do you prepare for your future understanding that getting people toward the kingdom, getting people moving in a good direction will make a better path for you? Do you understand that there is a future coming? There is an end coming, and what you do today prepares for that end. So, see, I think I know I'm short-sighted. When I do my charts, I only go up to age 90. And then I stop my chart, assuming that that's all I'm going to get. You know, I'm going to be done at age 90. which is it's not bad planning if you're only planning for retirement. But Jesus here is saying, hey guys, you know what? There's a lot more. What about eternity? What about beyond that? When you talk about future planning, you're only talking about the next 30 years, Bill. You're missing the point. What about the next 300,000 years? What are you doing about that? How's your investment there? How's your planning there? What are you doing about the real future? Jesus says, guys in the world get it, but guys who are of heaven seem to miss it. Invest your money so that when you get home, you will be welcomed in. Now, I know we all look at this and we're, good evangelical Christians, so we know that, I don't have to tithe. I don't have to give money. God's not going to be rating me on that because all I have to do is believe. I just believe. It just feels good to believe. It doesn't feel so good to write a check. Did you ever notice that? I mean, sometimes it feels good to write a check, right? When God's moving you and you're excited about something and you write out a check for $500 and you give it to a ministry or a person or somebody you want to support and you really feel like God's doing it, man, that feels good, doesn't it? Amen. Whew, that's good. But now, as God talks about this, Jesus talks about this, he's saying, I want you to write your checks out recognizing there's a long-term future out there. How are you shrewd? How are you wise? How are you prudent in what you're doing? Because if all you're planning for is the next 30 years, you're missing it. Long-term planning. That's what Jesus is challenging us to do. Using our resources, our money, wisely, prudently, for the very, very long term. A whole different perspective on it, I think. Well, he goes on. He doesn't finish up there. Jesus, in fact, as you read through the Gospels, you'll find out that Jesus spends more time talking about money than he does about hell. I mean, he's really trying to get to the point. Guys, come on. How you live your life makes a difference. So verse 10, he goes on. He says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? So he talks about today and how we handle what we have today, with what you do with your finances right now, right here. If you're trustworthy with your finances today, then there will be a future blessing potential. And he draws that right out of the story he's teaching, right? If you were untrustworthy with the master's stuff, you get fired. That's what happened to the manager. So he says, the same way, guys, how you handle what God has given you today will determine what happens tomorrow. Now, this tomorrow could be within those 30 years of life that's left, or it could be out there. What will God do for you when you are trustworthy with the things that you had as you carried through this world? What will he do in the future realm? Now, God doesn't spend a lot of time giving us insight into what heaven is like and all the details of it. A lot of it is symbolic, and so we're kind of left to figure it out and go, I wonder what God would do. Now, God's creative, amen? God put all this together. God's a lover of beauty, right? So we kind of figure, well, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be colorful, Terry says, with her purple hair. Yeah, it's going to be colorful. It's going to be fun and exciting because God's all about joy and hope, right? So it's going to be that kind of a place. But God is also a God of thinking and wisdom and ideas and moving forward and changing. I mean, he put into creativity into our world so that we would begin to change our world ourselves. So I think there's some of that out there too. So what might God do with your creative genius in the future if you were trustworthy with what you did here? And what might God say if you blew it through all these years? You know, you didn't do so good, Bill. Those first 80 years I gave you, so I'm going to give you a little. Here's $20, Bill. Go invest that and see what you can do. I don't know exactly how the formula works, but I know that his challenge here is what you do with the little you have today affects tomorrow. Maybe the local tomorrow, maybe the long-term tomorrow. And if you're not faithful with what God has given you, would he give you your own stuff? Now that's an interesting picture, right? All we have today is God's. All we are is stewards. Is there a hint of a promise there that maybe God would actually give us stuff that was our own? Wow, that's interesting. If you're a good steward today, I'll give you your own stuff tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow he'll give you your own stuff. So today's decision about whatever we have, however little we perceive it to be, is important to our tomorrow. Okay, lesson number 1 is planning for the way out there future. Amen. Lesson number 2 is what do we do with the little we have today? Make sure you're taking care of the little you have today. Are you making your decisions based on listening to God? Is that where you're really, really making your decisions? Because it's easy to make decisions, well, as Ed started us off the internet, right? We could make decisions off of Google, and that might be good and it might not be good. Listen to God. Listen to God. He goes on, verse 13. No one can serve 2 masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Third passage here is about, okay, we need to tune in so that we understand who it is we're following. Whose advice are you following? When you make decisions, even, out of Dave Ramsey's world, he's a Christian financial guru out there. If you go to Dave Ramsey and you follow him, you're going to be financially secure. Well, maybe. We'll see about that. But God here is challenging us, guys, don't follow money alone. Don't even follow the advisors who are about money. Follow me. Follow me. Because you can't serve both. You're going to serve one or the other. You're going to serve God or you're going to serve money. You can't do both. And man, in America, we are in trouble with this, huh? We work really hard to blend that together and make it into one thing. I serve God money. I serve money God. I serve, I only use my money for godly things, sort of, except for the things I need and want and desire. And wow. Whew. And I haven't got this right, okay? So don't be following Bill Bickmore, please. Follow God. What is it? What is it that God really wants us to do with our finances? You can't serve both masters. And one of the things that gets in the way, at least in my world, is there's Bill. He's kind of like the third player in this triad. I don't necessarily follow money because I want money, but I have Bill over there who wants stuff. Do you have one of those in your life? A Bill who wants stuff? Yeah. A Lori who wants stuff. I see you there, Lori. Yeah, I want stuff. There's this triad. It's me, it's the money thing in general, and it's God. And he's saying, dudes, you only got one place to go. There's only one loyalty. There's only one decision-making place to go, and that's God. If you go somewhere else, you're basically saying no to God. Whew. You can't serve 2 masters. You will hate the one and love the other. If I love money, I hate God. Wow. He's not holding back here. He's pushing pretty hard on it. Okay. First up, plan for your long-term future. Way out there. Way out future. Secondly, handle today well. Handle today well. Whatever little you have, be a good steward, a good manager, a good take care guy of what you have today so that God can move you up, move you on, give you more. Thirdly, there's only one advisor you can listen to, and that's God. And if you listen to somebody else, the implication of that listening is you hate the one that you don't listen to. Whew, strong language. He continues. We're almost done with our little section here today. Verse 14. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. Guess what? The first response is when somebody says you either follow God or you follow money and you can't do both. No way. That's ridiculous. What is he talking about? Of course you can have money and God. Interesting. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, now he's turned around, right? He's talking to his disciples and the sneering Pharisees behind him. He's finally turning around and addressing them. You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others. Where do you justify yourself? In the eyes of others. So that the people will accept you. So that the peers will accept you. So that the ones that you walk beside will go, oh yeah, that's good. That's okay. That's acceptable. You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. You're not fooling God. You're not. God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. That's a great word there, detestable. I looked up the definition for that Greek word, and it's to reek with stench. That's nice, huh? To reek with stench. So what is it that's detestable? What people highly value reeks with stench in God's nostrils. He says, you got to be kidding me. That's terrible. That's what you're holding on to? That's what you're clinging to? God sees that so clearly, and we don't. The nose is a funny thing. You know, I did a little reading about the nose. When you first smell something really strong, your nose picks right up on it. You go, woo, wow, that garlic. Oh, baby, huh? I can remember, you remember Rod Parker? Some of you remember Rod Parker. We went over to his house one night for dinner, and his wife, whose name escapes me right now, Jan, right? Is that it? Jan. Jan was baking garlic cloves. You know, we were going to use it as a dip. And so as we drove up the driveway, it's like, oh, woo, baby. Wow, does it smell like garlic out here? And we got in the house and it was crazy. And then by the time we got to eating this hors d'oeuvre, this starting off thing, it was, I didn't even notice. It was like, oh, this is great. I'm sure now I reeked, but I thought it was great. You know, these roasted garlics, they were fabulous. The nose adjusts to smell. And after a while, it doesn't smell it anymore. Yeah, which is a good thing, you know, considering the smell of some of your husband's socks. Yeah, it's a good thing that the nose finally calms down and gets used to it. In fact, in your own house, right? Have you ever been away for a while and then you come back to your house and you go, oh, it smells like home, right? But when you're in home, you don't even smell it. It's like, I don't know, does it smell in here? But when you come home, you can notice it after a vacation or a trip or something. It's because our nose gets used to a smell. God uses this smell idea. He says the things you value in the world, they stink, but you don't even notice. You've been around them so much and you are inundated by this all day long and you've just shut down. You don't even think about it. That's what happens in the world of managing God's resources. That's what happens sometimes. We don't smell it anymore. And God's saying, wow, that reeks. That's putrid. That's terrible. That's so far from God. And Jesus, I think he goes to the Pharisees and he likes to let them have it. And he was not holding back. Guys, what you like is putrid to God. Now, these are the godly guys, right? I mean, the Pharisees were the God lovers, theoretically. They were the ones who were in the temple. They were the ones who were running. They were the pastors and the elders. These were the serious guys about walking with God. And he said, what you value, it stinks, reeks. Careful there. Okay, God's advice today. How you handle your finances. So how much of your financial investment is in the long term? Long term. beyond your life? How much of it's there? That's the real future investments. Secondly, what are you doing with today? No matter how little you got, how are you doing with today? Are you managing that well? Are you doing what God would have you do with it? Third is who are you listening for advice? There's a lot of advisors out there who will tell you what to do and how to do it. Are you listening to God first? Is He the one? Is He the one who's advising you on what to do with your finances? And finally, maybe you should go for a walk around a little bit and get your nose cleared from the putrid smell that you don't even notice anymore. And you know, one of the ways that I think I've done that in my lifetime is I took my trip to Haiti, several trips to Haiti. And there's a whole new smell in Haiti. It's not a good smell, by the way. It's a bad smell. It smells like burning rubber on the street corners and you know, it's sewerage running down the streets, and it's terrible. It's a really rough place that way. But in another way, when we got back to America, I realized how much we stunk, because we just have so much, and we are so used to it, we don't even notice. We don't even think about it. It smells like home to us. Maybe we should clear our nostrils by breathing deeply somewhere else. May God lead us well. I know it's not fun and it's not comfortable to talk about money, but God does it, so let's think about it. Let's see what God brings to our hearts. Amen? Amen.